everyone. My name is Libby Stellis, and I am subbing for Angela Beer today. She is not available. I may know some of you. I was the director of the Stanford Institute of Philanthropy for a number of years before Andrea took over. And I'm going to see what I can see here about changing to, oh, all right. Welcome. You may have noticed on our first slide that it said Fundraising Academy at City University of Seattle. We are an affiliate of the program from National University down in San Diego, and they have gone through a rebranding and have changed the name from Institute of Philanthropy to the Fundraising Academy. And we're happy to do that as well. There used to be some confusion about whether, as an Institute of Philanthropy, we were giving away money as opposed to teaching fundraising. And the Fundraising Academy is a clearer way of expressing the kind of continuing education that we do in fundraising. My background is in nonprofits and fundraising in the greater Seattle area for many, many years. And I am happy to be here with you. We are going to have a conversational kind of workshop today. We hope that you will be able to interact around that, and that if you have questions or answers, or you want to ask a question, you can use the chat form or the question and answer at the bottom of the page. And so without much further ado, I'd like to introduce Stephanie Ellis-Smith. So Stephanie is the owner of the philanthropic advisory firm Phyla Engage Giving. She's a charter advisor in philanthropy and a certified 2164 advisor in multi-generational philanthropy. She works with individuals, families, foundations, and corporations to enhance their giving in light of their goals and incorporate best practices in the field. She's dedicated to empowering her clients to feel the joy that comes from using their wealth, talents, and experience to improve the lives of those around them through philanthropy. She believes strongly in being a compassionate and generous member of society, and has dedicated over 20 years of her professional and personal life to the development of high impact families and organizations. Having served in a variety of capacities in the social sector, as a nonprofit CEO, social enterprise company COO, foundation and nonprofit trustee, and even a corporate board member, her diverse experience and a unique perspective is an invaluable asset for her clients. And I believe an invaluable asset to us today to understand more about donors giving and how we can best work with donors. So I'd like to welcome Stephanie.
Thank you, Libby, and hello, everyone. It's really good to be here. I appreciate the invitation.
Great. So we're going to sort of do this as a little bit of a question and discussion, and I have some questions, and I hope that the folks who are with us will also have questions. You know, I noticed in your bio that you really have kind of had a seat at the nonprofit table sort of in every different area. And so if you tell us a little about your journey through nonprofits and your current work and how those connect for you.
Sure, thank you. You know, it's funny, and that is a good question, but I'll start off by saying that I'm a scientist by training. So when I say that I started off in the nonprofit sector, I started off in the universities. My intention was to be a bench scientist in microbiology and virology at the time when I was at UCLA, and that's actually what brought me to Seattle. I was hired at the University of Washington to work in a retrovirus lab doing work on HIV. And then things happen and life happens. And I decided that that wasn't gonna be the life for me. I had such broad interest. I mean, I loved science, I still do, but I had such broad interest. And at that stage of going into a career like that, there really isn't room for anything else. And I just kind of didn't think that I could live with it. So I withdrew all of my applications and all of that kind of stuff for graduate schools. And I ended up kind of a little windy road, but I ended up working with the artist Jacob Lawrence and his wife Gwen Lawrence, and two art historians. So still in kind of this academic place, but starting to move into the public side, um, sort of public basic work. And it was really through that experience dealing with an artist, the actual output of the Catalogue Raisonné, the 2-volume book of his work and legacy, and dealing with the collectors who were also donors to the project, really kind of gave me this 360 view of how all of these different people kind of come together. The service providers, in this case, were the art historians who were putting together the book. But being a part of every aspect of that work was just incredibly enlightening, and really from there opened the pathway for me to doing the work basically that I do now. I founded and started a nonprofit here in Seattle, the Central District Forum for Arts and Ideas, the CD Forum, um, between boards, working with foundations. I'm currently on the board of the Washington Women's Foundation. It's just all of this kind of work to make a rich and robust civic society. And that's what I wanted. And donors have always been obviously a very key component to that. And I've always sort of been drawn to fundraising, maybe like you all. I've been one of these rare folks, people who just love fundraising. And I love fundraising because I love talking to people and I really love hearing their stories. And that's essentially the path in a nutshell. Sometimes I think it seems very disparate, but when you really think about it, I guess it actually isn't. It's sort of like being in this nexus of places where you can kind of see all around you and seeing how all of these things come together to make something, to create something, to put out
Right.
into the world.
Yeah, no, it makes a lot of sense. And I think a lot of fundraisers come at fundraising from a variety of different places and different reasons. I noticed that one of the elements of your work is clarifying with donors what their philanthropic intent is, what they want to do with the gifts that they have to give.
Mhm.
And what could you share some tools that you use in that process? And any lessons you think our fundraising professionals could glean from the tools that you use?
Sure. This is an EQ kind of business, and I think the emotional quotient that you're able to put into the work is I think hugely important and key. It's empathic listening, to really listen and decenter, yourself as a person in the room, not to minimize yourself, but to really listen deeply enough that you are creating the space. And I always say this is actually what I do, creating the space for people to do their own best thinking, because that work and coming up with the tools and getting them to do what they need to do is their job. It's actually not my job. I don't This goes to like, what is a philanthropic advisor? I don't lead them to decide, oh, you need to, go here, or you need to do this, but the decisions are theirs. And to do that, having this tool of really deep listening and being able to listen enough to help them, to ask them the questions that are too hard to ask of yourself. So you have to be willing to do that. And then the other tool is time. That's an advantage that I have that I think that some development professionals necessarily don't have. If they're on a deadline quarterly trying to get numbers in, it's really hard. But this is a long-term kind of thing. And sometimes people aren't in the headspace to have these kinds of questions. And you have the time to kind of come back and revisit. And then like a tool, I use a lot of exploratory surveys and proprietary things that I sort of created myself, to help prompt people to start thinking and pulling things out so that you can get at the heart of the matter of what they're actually really trying to accomplish in their philanthropy.
Great. And do you think you're trying to help them answer the question why?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
The question is ultimately, why do you want to do this? Uh,
Mhm.
I personally, not all philanthropic advisors work this way. My shop is, I call it, a judgment-free zone, because I want people to be really honest. What is it that you want? We all give because we want something, and it's not bad. You want to give, someone because you want to help and you want to feel that sense of decency within you. That's perfectly okay. Sometimes you want to give because I have a family business and it's out there. I actually need to be seen over here. That's real. That's a thing. But to make real meaningful gifts and for people to feel impact, because I always say, I want to feel the impact. Well, then you got to be honest with what you're doing
Mhm.
and why you're doing it.
Mhm.
And if it's all one thing, if it's all just, business, well, then you don't have any, in my mind, you don't have any real business looking for impact other than your bottom line ROI over here. Because you're
Mhm.
not going to feel it here if it's a business transaction. So it's like really just trying to get at that why exactly.
Mhm.
Makes
Making
this
the
all
connection between the heart and the head, perhaps. Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah. And do you think what you do is easier than the fundraising professional who's in one organization who maybe is working with people who are considering a gift? What do you think the differences might be there?
Yeah, I don't know if it's easier. There surely are different challenges.
Mhm.
In some ways, the development professional may have it quote unquote easier, because they've got this focus and you know, they know where the end is. I start this work and I don't necessarily know where the end is.
Mhm.
I follow, where it goes and however long um, it will take. I think that there's another big difference, and I've said this before in the last question, but this idea of time, that is an advantage that I have that I don't necessarily have. I don't have to meet, a goal for an organization that I'm affiliated with to actually keep running,
Mhm.
especially in this day and age and this year. Um, the deadlines are tight and they're real. Um, so that's a big difference. And gosh, there was one other that I thought was it's the vantage point. I think a difference, and I don't know if it's an advantage or a disadvantage, but for the development professional, they see a gift that's coming in, like they're getting $10,000. They may see it come from the donor, the DAF, foundation, or maybe a wealth manager that's making a stock transfer or something. My vantage point is everything that came behind that.
Mm.
I'm there with the estate planning attorneys, with the CPAs, I see the sausage being made to have that advantage, disadvantage, I don't know. So that's another big difference. I have maybe a wider lens. I see the entire balance sheet of
Mhm.
how all these gifts are come about.
Mhm.
Um, and so that's a difference. Sometimes good, sometimes not as good.
Yes, and what I think the gift you probably have to give to fundraising professionals is to help them understand what is happening over there, and the time that it takes before it's going to get to them.
Yeah.
Uh, to I think to support them, wouldn't it? In a way.
In a way, yes. Because I come from the nonprofit sector, and I make no bones about this, my alliances are with the dev team. I lean more, yes, I've been there, and I lean more on that side. And most of the conversations that I have, the deeper conversations, is basically about donor education, because frankly, there's a lot of machinations in getting things organized, but once it's in a DAF or in a foundation or there's a plan, and that's a big part of it, is creating a plan, their job, the donor's job, is now to get the money out the door,
Mhm.
period and full stop. you've done, we talk about trust-based philanthropy, which I spend a lot of time talking about. You've done your due diligence, you know these people, give them the money. I mean, it's keep it moving, just kind of keep it moving. And it's okay. Once you do it and you kind of get in the rhythm, it feels good. I do use a little bit of my science background, and granted, like I said, I was a bench scientist, but with this work, what if you make a wrong gift? What's the worst that's going to happen? Like, if you don't get the impact that you think, or it's used not exactly the way that you hope, no one's going to die.
Mm,
That's the beauty of our, I mean, nothing really bad is going to happen.
mhm,
Most of the time, they've already got their tax deduction.
mhm,
They have very little risk. And I think for me, there's a lot of psychology in dealing with them, because these are people, very, very wealthy people who are used to being in control. They're
mhm.
used to things being perfect. They're used to people making things, even if they're not perfect, they're used to having people make things perfect that they can see. And when you are engaged in an organization, when you are engaged in the nonprofit sector, we're all working on the things that business can't solve by itself, that government can't solve by itself. Inherently, these issues that we're dealing with are murky.
Mhm.
And it's not going to be, oh, I gave $15,000, so that was done. Now that's fixed. I mean, no, this is
Right.
this is this is the work. And so they have to learn how to be a little bit more comfortable in a space where people are trying and iterating and seeing what is going to work. Some are better, more comfortable than others.
Well, that leads into another really quite important question, I think is in somewhat behind what folks are going through and you're teaching them, which is how do the attitudes towards money affect both these philanthropists and fundraisers? Um, and do you have any examples of, what you need to do to help them or help the fundraising professional understand their attitudes and beliefs about money?
Yeah, I am one of these people, and I think this is one thing that is maybe a little bit more unique to my practice than some of my peers. I spend a lot of time talking about money and wealth, and I make it a point, whenever I can, to actually use the word money, because sometimes people are like, "Ooh, that just feels really icky," or whatever. But that's philanthropy, and that is, it is what it is. That is what it's about for a lot of people, and then when they're coming into it. And I feel like if you don't, as a donor, as a philanthropist, if you don't have a good understanding of what you have, how you got it, how you feel about it, um, but you want to then kind of move into the space, into the sector, you're not gonna be able to make authentic connections, because as I tell them, your whisper is a roar. You can't go into the homeless shelter as a donor and thinking no one's going to know it's me. I'm like, they can see you coming a mile away, how you carry yourself, the kind of questions that you ask. So instead of pretending that you know, I'm not sitting on a pile of $100 million. You need to be honest with yourself first. I said, believe me, the development people know who you are because they're professionals and they're smart. Um, be honest. And there's a lot of I don't know, there's some shame, a little bit of kind of pride. I'm like, it's okay to be, if you earned it, you should be proud. I mean, this is work that you did, however you got it. It's pretty impressive. But there's shame, there's pride, there's all of these, like how we all feel about money. And it's magnified the higher you get up on the wealth scale. There are people who, and I think it's important for fundraisers to know that they're different, not all, just like everybody, not everybody's the same. There are these philanthropists who are kind of upward oriented. And these are people who are the ones who may kind of come in, well, I'm just going to toss $100,000 over here. I know it's not very much, and we're like, what? This is fantastic. But they're kind of playing it down. They're upward oriented. They're looking like, but so-and-so over here can give 1 million. So what am I? I actually had someone call me, and it was just, this is where we are, especially in Seattle, with the two of the richest people that we live with in the world are here, Jeff Bezos and Bill Gates. One person called me and said, I just don't know what to do. I feel like I don't have enough money to make any real impact. And I said, well, I mean, I said, it depends on, where you're playing, what field you're in. I said, but what are you annually giving? And he's like, well, right now, it's just 2 million a year, but can you do anything decent with that? What do you do with that kind of question? And he's upwardly oriented because he's like, 2 million a year is not going to cure malaria in Kerala.
Right.
So is there any point?
Mhm.
Whereas there are other people who are downwardly oriented, who know that they have a lot and maybe feel shame or that they don't deserve it,
Mm.
and are just like, here, please take it. I don't want it. I don't want to touch it. I had a client um, come to me, and it was our first meeting, and he basically had all of his um, sheets from his wealth advisor, financial information, and just basically kind of like handed it all to me. He goes, I just want to give this all away. I don't want any of it. And so that's what I want to hire you for. And I'm like, okay, well, hold on a minute. We need to actually have a discussion about this. And, after, talking and everything, we learned, because he didn't even want to look at it deeply enough to know, number one, much of it was locked in trust. He can't give it away, even if he wanted to. The way his grandparents set it up, he had no choice but to take it. And two, whatever, if he could unlock more of it, he couldn't live long enough to get rid of it.
Mm.
So I'm like, your job, you've got to think about what this means for you. And this is your life. You can't not have it and pretend that it doesn't exist,
Mm.
because it's not fair to you. It's not fair to the organizations that you want to be. He wanted to, fund small movement building organizations on the front lines. You can't just drop $500,000 to an organization that's got a $30,000 budget.
Mhm.
So I said, you've got a lot of thinking to do about how you're going to live with this over the long term, because where you want to fund, if you want to go in higher ed could suck that up very quickly.
Mhm.
If that's not what you want to do, then you're going to have to find some ways of sitting with yourself
Mhm.
and understanding what this means. So this idea of money, I think, is huge. And I think when a donor and a philanthropist can really understand their own feelings with it, I think hopefully it makes it easier to have discussions with development teams and fundraising folks, because they know what they have. They can come to dev people like, this is what I'm interested in. This is how I'd like to be involved. And where this side of the table, you all side of the table, is not going, what is going on here? Like, I could tell there's all this weird stuff happening behind here, but should I ask? Or,
Mhm.
I hope that if people have any kind of interactions with my clients, that all that stuff will be taken care of, and that it's a little bit more of an authentic and honest conversation with their needs, with
Mhm.
their wants, and so how they can actually really help and be useful with the organizations that they hope to serve.
Well, those are just some really great examples too. On the development side, do you have any suggestion for what development people need to know about their own attitudes towards money and how it affects their work?
Yeah, because we all have it.
Mhm.
We all have those little things that just kind of like grate, on us, because we're raised with money messages. And I think it's always worth exploring. There's a book by an author that I really enjoy, and it's kind of old school. I think it came out in the 90s, maybe, which doesn't actually seem that long ago, but
In
it
fact,
like 30 years ago.
years. Yeah.
I know, but Lynn Twist, she has a number of books, but The Soul of Money. I think it's just a kind of an interesting and good book, just to kind of probe ideas about how you come about, how does it deal, how do you think about it? Whether you grew up with a lot, a little, somewhere in between, but we all put values on it. And again, like I say, world here is kind of a judgment-free zone. And I really do believe that it's in and of itself value neutral. It's really a tool to do other things. And the thing is, how do we use that tool? And like, what do we feel comfortable? Do we feel comfortable wielding it in one way versus another way? And then why or why not? And I think if a development professional can do that and have those conversations with themselves, or just think about it a little bit, I think again, you're meeting with donors, especially the major donors, um, in a way that that could be a little bit more empowering, I think, for the development professional, because you can use, like, okay, I see this, I can see what this is about. I see maybe where there might be struggling here, and it just gives you, I don't know, I think it just might just give you another arrow in your quiver of how to approach someone who's really thinking a lot and trying to figure out, how can I want to kind of be a part of what you're doing, but am I really, or like, is this awkward? But it's a tool to help you kind of read. And if you know yourself,
Mhm.
you are better equipped to read what other people might be dealing with. It helps you keep a little bit more of the upper hand.
Great. I'm just going to pause for a minute. I'm going to check. I don't see any questions in the chat. I hope we'll put that book title in the chat. But I want to leave a moment, see if anybody has a question. And you have some water or something? Okay. Well, please do put something in the chat if you want. So, in this year that so much has been going on. Anyway, I think the conversations about equity and philanthropy, and in donor and staff and community-centered fundraising is starting to people are becoming more and more aware of those issues. And I wonder if you would have any comments or thoughts about equity in philanthropy, or new models of community-centered fundraising, and how your practice would contribute to that, or not, I guess, but I don't think so.
Yeah, I think now more than ever, for dealing with issues of inclusion and
Mhm.
equity, the COVID pandemic has obviously been the great revealer. We all know that we might all be in the same storm, but we're in different boats,
Right.
quality boats, right? And then quickly on those heels was the murder of George Floyd, and then everything else in this racial reckoning that came about this summer. And how long that will last, I don't know. Sometimes I feel like we as Americans have a short-term memory with things like that. Um, but this is in a really important moment to rejigger and rethink how we approach giving, fundraising, and then philanthropy writ large. On my end, I have always been my approach has always been from the very beginning a community-centered approach. And that is, for if people who are not familiar, I'm sorry, I have just like kind of I think it's allergies or dust, so I apologize for my nose on occasion, but community-centered philanthropy or fundraising versus donor-centered. Um, I Donors are centered all the time, everywhere they go. In our sector, they are generally centered, and I think we're at a moment that it's okay to let them know that what we're centering, because we've always had to do this, but now more than ever, we must center our beneficiaries. the people that we are actually trying to serve, the whole point of all of us doing the work that we do is, for me, at least from my side, is to move money from the private sector back to the public sector. And once it's in the public sector, I'm now looking to see and make sure that that money actually is going to the beneficiaries, that it is like going to the people who need it the most, the people who are actually doing the work. And that's where we're at. More than likely, more now than ever, donors are willing to hear that message. I'm saying it for sure. And I think nonprofits and development folks are the professionals. I tell my donors this all the time. You want to like learn about, housing and homelessness. These people are the experts. And now the nonprofits really need to actually act like it, because the donors are now listening. We know that the folks who are working in these fields, they know what they're talking about. They know the communities that they serve. And every other sort of major foundation, from Ford to Kresge to across the board, are saying and putting this message out there that these people know what they're doing. Do your due diligence, move the money. And these nonprofits then take it and actually really do it and ask for it in a way that, you don't want to say like demand, but if you could ever demand in fundraising, now's the moment, because donors are really listening and they know that the imbalance of wealth and access, it has gone too far. Donor-centered, wealthy, not even donor, wealthy-centered everything has kind of jumped the shark a little bit. And I think many more people are listening to that. And my phone email really kind of rings off the hook, so to speak, from a lot of folks asking like, gee, I never really realized this, but no, I actually do have a lot. And all of my people, the wealth managers, the estate planning attorneys, the CPAs, the wealth coaches, they're all talking about, preservation and moving it on to the next generation. My kids, they're like, well, I kind of think actually my kids are probably going to be pretty good. I don't need to give them everything. Probably start letting go of some of this. And that many more people, more than ever, are thinking that they can do that. And so it's interesting. And I think it's a really exciting time to be thinking bigger and being really crystal clear about need, because people are listening.
Yeah. Do you find yourself a champion of educating those financial people about their perspective of always advising to preserve?
Yeah.
And how you can make it impact them so that they see themselves, and even question, I guess, their own connection or idea about money, so that, to help loosen that hold on, you must preserve the principle. You must preserve the principle.
Yeah. Libby, that's a great question. They're a tough nut to crack as a whole. I'll just say, we're taught completely different things, and they're incentivized differently. They base their fees off of assets under management. And, here I come kind of skipping along. Let's move more of your assets from being under your management. And they're like, whoa.
Yeah.
But, where I and other people, other fundraising professionals who are close enough in to have the ear of these folks, the upper hand we have is if they have a charitable client and their financial professional advisor is not listening to them, people who are deeply charitably inclined, so much so that they're willing to pay me to help them do that. If they're that charitably inclined and they're not listening, they're going to lose that client, because those folks, this is who they are. This is a part of their expression. This is a part of their family's legacy. And if a financial advisor is not listening to that, shame on them. They're going to lose the client. And I've been a part of, not that I instigated, but two who've lost clients of mine because they're like, you're just actually not hearing. I don't want that. Or pushing, extreme tax measures,
Mhm.
tax avoidance measures.
Mhm.
Well, we can move this little thing over here, and then if you write it up, and they're like, no, I don't want to do that. I'd actually just much rather. I'm like, well, you should probably do that. And again, this family was like, it's time to find somebody new who can actually just really hear us. I think they're going to take longer
Mhm.
to get to the specific of your question
Mhm.
for the education, just because I think the way they're incentivized. But there are some who just really get it and who push their clients. And they're, always a joy to work with because, they have those companion skills that I don't have. And
Right.
we're able to work well together to help them feel comfortable, the family, that they're going to be fine, their kids, grandkids, and even are going to be fine. And you
Mhm.
can still do something really transformational and meaningful with your philanthropy. And it's only my job is only made easier when I have a financial advisor and a state attorney who agrees and says the same thing. It works
Great.
well.
Great. In much of fundraising education, there is a section where planned giving is the topic.
Yes.
And so it's been my opinion as a fundraiser that um, I'm not the best person to dive deep into all of those different ways that you can do planned gifts or how you give that money away. Um, and because there's many much more expertise than me. There's the advisors. Would you suggest any way that a team, a fundraising team or the organization, how they might develop a relationship with someone like you or another a tax lawyer, or, how do they find those people to say, when we have somebody who's looking at something, would you help partner to be to make put this all together rather than, because most organizations are not going to have a planned giving officer. I
Yeah.
mean, the ones that I'm aware of.
Yeah.
And so then it seems to be there's this anxiety that if there's potentially a big donor, that they somehow have to know all of these different mechanisms and ways in which that donor's gift could come to them. Anything you might say about that?
Yeah, and I think just to back up for just a hot second, when you're talking about planned giving, I just wanted to give a shout out to Elizabeth Dale's study last year called I wrote it down. Oh, leaving a legacy, a study on planned giving, and it's a great overview of donors' ideas about uh, planned giving and how they think about their finances, wills, and all of those things. So I just wanted to um, bring that to everyone's attention if you haven't seen it. It's Leaving a Legacy by Elizabeth Dale. She's at Seattle U. Um, but to your question about how to how we could work together, potentially partner to really help a major donor kind of move over and like make that big gift. There are ways. Most folks who are working with a donor who has a capacity to leave a significant kind of transformational planned gift like that, I would guess you tend to know them, for the most part, you tend to know them fairly well. They've been involved in different ways. And I would say if you get the sense that they're kind of just asking some different kind of questions, some leading questions, or starting to talk about, I'm talking to you with my advisors, you would be more than welcome to ask them, do you want to talk with a philanthropic advisor? Have you thought about it? Or is your financial professional, is he or she really connected to the nonprofit sector? Do they really know how this works? Because if not, I could refer you to someone. One thing that I just did, and an organization did exactly what you asked. I don't think they would mind me saying so, because I think they were hoping it would be a pilot, but it was the ACLU of Washington. And because of the elections after 2016, they had a huge run up of donations, major gifts, 5, 6 figure gifts from people that they don't even know. And
Mm.
they're like, my God, okay. And I thought what was so interesting when they called me is that they were like, well, we know that they're giving this to us just off the cuff. We didn't ask.
Right.
Know that there's more, and
Mhm.
that's a good fundraiser. Because
Right.
if off the cuff you're giving somebody 50,000, you know that they can give 200, right? Because they're not even thinking about it.
Right.
And they said, well, and not maybe just for us, but I don't think these people know about their own giving and philanthropy in general. And I know that they're interested in other things. So would you be interested in doing a workshop, for this small cohort, basically trying to distill what I do with clients in 18 months
Mhm.
into like an 8-hour workshop,
Mhm.
just to kind of seed some big thoughts in them, again, to help unlock that philanthropy. And we did that actually in October. And it was the first time I did it. So I was very nervous.
Mhm.
But I think it worked out really, really well. And other folks the people who were participating got this perspective that, okay, well, we knew the ACLU, we were safe with that because, we've always heard about it. But so do you think that so we could actually really do this with this group? Or that? I'm like, yes, absolutely you can.
Yeah.
And that was the purpose, was to fine, play with the ACLU. It's safe, it's good, you get it.
Mhm.
But then here's an overall view of how this whole sector works, so you can figure out where else you can go and
Right.
what else you can do. So those are some of that's just an example of the type of thing that I think that with some creativity, we could do with donors to sort of
Mhm.
unlocking funds. And really, I do believe a rising tide lifts all boats, because I say it's better for the fundraising professional, the development person, to be that big person, to say, you keep asking me, if you're in the arts, you keep talking about homelessness and everything. Would you like an introduction to somebody over here?
Right.
That goes a long way,
Right.
because there's also this idea of they're just only talking to me to raise money for their organizations. They don't really care about anything else that I want to do, or
Right.
anything else. It's all a ruse to kind of,
Right.
up the gift. But I think if a fundraising person is able to say, I have really amazing colleagues who do civil liberties work. We
Mhm.
should go, we should go there together.
Mhm.
I'll introduce you, or whatever. Those types of things, and introducing them to help unlock all of that at those funds. That is where then you move from just being a fundraising professional to more someone that they can really trust, more of a trusted advisor.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's the place where I sit,
Mhm.
and I think fundraising professionals can sit there too. But
Uh, right.
it's it's
You
a
know,
challenge
I
sometimes.
agree. I agree that it also has, in my experience, when something has sort of come our way, but it doesn't really fit us, um, that whole side of, well, we can't turn down a gift.
I know, I know.
But yeah, but I think our integrity, and our commitment to the wider community is enhanced by saying, we're actually not the best fit for that gift.
Yeah.
I'd love to introduce you to, so and so, and take you for coffee and learn more about what they're, because as I understand, what you want to do is this, and we're more over here this. The whys are connected, but the execution might be different. And I have had people kind of look at me like, are you telling me to take my money somewhere else? And I'm like, well, if that's the best place for it,
Yeah.
yes, I
Mhm.
am. And I think it raises our profession. It raises the
Yes.
commonality and the commitment to the community that, I like to say, in terms of volunteers, I don't believe any warm body will do. I think we need to, sort of be attentive, like how we pick and what we pick and match people. And I don't think any check will do just because it's a check. If it isn't, especially if the donor wants to put conditions on it that don't fit us.
Mhm.
Um,
Mm.
and so I appreciate, you sharing that and saying that. So, um, do you have more individual clients? What kind of clients do you have? And if I'm a development professional, when do I call you to say, hey, can I, introduce you to someone who I think it might be in both of our best interests for them to know?
Mhm. I work exclusively with individuals and families. If you Google me, you'll also see that I am a senior advisor at the Giving Practice, which is a part of Philanthropy Northwest. And over there, I'll do some work with institutional funders, large foundations with big staffs, and that's strategic governance kind of work or whatever. But my bread and butter, my heart work, is with individuals and families. Most of my clients tend to be people who are newer to the world and newer to the sector.
Mhm.
I really enjoy that a lot. I really enjoy, and I didn't realize this, and maybe some of the folks in the webinar will appreciate it as well, but um, I didn't realize how much jargon we use um, until I decided I need to actually make a glossary of
Mhm.
just like all the terms that they'll hear. And they're like, oh, okay, because a lot of folks feel that this work is opaque.
Mm.
And I was like, really? I, I never saw that, but I was just so mired in it, and
Mhm.
I love it so much, and I love the sector so much and fundraising so much. I never saw it. So most of the folks are new. They are typically, to make it worthwhile to sort of pay someone, I don't, if they're giving basically less than 150, 200,000 a year, I'd rather they went on Giving Compass and kind of did more of a DIY and save the money that you would be giving to me and actually just
Mhm.
start getting out there, join Washington Women's Foundation and
Mhm.
learn on your own that way. But if they're giving significantly, and again, as a fundraiser, well, I'm giving 150,000 a year, but then that means, there's a lot more capacity. And then it's worthwhile calling, someone like me, because it's the cost benefit of
Mhm.
having someone really help them lay everything out, unlock it, and ostensibly more than can go back out into the community. Those are the types of folks that I think are would benefit. They're looking for something. They just haven't felt it. They want to be closer to the sector, but they don't know how to get in.
Mhm.
Because a lot of folks like, I don't want to just be like a volunteer. I mean, like, I really want to really get in there. Like, how do I?
Mhm.
So, and that's something that I think, you all can do is again, making those strategic introductions to other EDs, to other donors. The ACLU put together a small cohort, and it was just 4 couples,
Mhm.
and they ended up just bonding so well together. They were started doing everything together all through the ACLU, and they're just sort of, learning about things together, and that's where I came in. Um, so there's things like that you can do when you see people are just kind of yearning for a bit more. They're ready to take another step, and there's more back in there. That means they just need a little help, maybe getting some things unlocked.
Great. Just what are the top 3 things on that list of that glossary list that we think
Oh,
we think everyone knows?
oh shoot. God, can I
Or
even?
if you're willing to share it, in any way, or if it's somewhat on your website or something. I just let
It's
people.
not on my.
I kind of think, well, what do I know that I use, but in fact is not necessarily known.
Yes, let me think on that.
Okay.
Let me think on that. I haven't looked at it in a while, so it's actually not in the forefront of my mind, but that's a good question. I should share it, and I'll dig that out and send
That
that to you all.
that would be great. One last question for me, and then I'm going to leave it open just a little bit longer. Uh, I hear a lot lately. Well, what about all those Amazon millennials? They have so much money and they're not giving.
Yeah.
And I'm going to guess that that's actually not true. I mean, I have some thoughts on my own, but I just wonder if you have any, because there's this illusion that they're just making hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars and they're living on, mattresses on the floor, and they're not doing anything. Any opinion?
Well, most there's always a kernel of truth in every stereotype.
Mhm.
Um, so they are doing things. Are they doing things to the extent that they could? No. But the question is why?
Mhm.
A lot of these young millennials, they're working.
Mhm.
Again, when you pull out of our sort of day to day and you look at people as people,
Mhm.
20s and 30s, I think this is Eric Erickson.
Mhm.
20s and 30s, that's the time of life for love and work.
Right.
You're finding your life mate, you're building your career. And the weird world in which we live in, the timeline of like the reaping the rewards of building a career comes a lot sooner than it used to in the past. And so I would say for some of those folks, they're not in the headspace to be thinking about philanthropy with a capital P. Many of them are donors. They'll, give when asked,
Mhm.
mobile kind of giving. They've done a lot for a lot of these COVID relief efforts that have been happening this year. But I think when it's time for them to really sit down and be the major donors who you all are having conversations with,
Mhm.
that's not going to be until their kids are a little older,
Mhm.
um, work is settled, they're
Right.
still trying to prove themselves. I mean, they're like 37,
Right.
they have to, I don't know how many millions, billions in the bank, but that's not where their head is. I
Right.
mean, they're
Yeah.
still
No,
thinking like, I got to work.
I completely agree. Whenever I sort of think of myself in my 20s and 30s, yeah, I just, yeah, I gave here and there because I was raised to do that, but not because I was involved in, really like, oh, how do I want my community to be? Because I was, kind of focused this way.
Yeah,
Well, we're just about out of time. We haven't had any questions, so I'm thinking we answered all the questions.
good.
And I know that when we send out a follow-up, that I'm going to try and include those books that you mentioned, and also your contact information. I'm thinking you're at least willing to have short conversations with anybody who has a particular question that they want to ask you.
Sure, feel free to send an email.
And if there's just something that you want to leave us with as a final suggestion about your work, or how, or our work, or working together.
Well, I think folks in the nonprofit world are getting suggestions and directives all the time. I'm going to leave it with a thank you.
Mhm.
I'm going to leave it with a thank you to all of you for doing what you do. It is not easy work. It has been even less easy this year. And I, for one, am hugely grateful for all of you. And I hope you all enjoy your holidays and actually rest. So there's my suggestion.
Great. No, I agree. Thank you so much. And I really appreciate, what information you've brought to us, and especially around helping people understand about attitudes of money and how to release it into the world. And I hope you too have wonderful holidays, and that all of us that are on the workshop today are safe and healthy. So
Yes.
thanks so much.
Thank you.